Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Eldon. I am the managing editor of TechCrunch, and with me today is David Cancel, a five-time,
Yes,
six-time,
five.
is kind of hard to keep track, repeat entrepreneur who has mostly focused on SaaS, but dabbled in more than dabbled in a wide variety of other areas. We're going to have questions coming up soon. Just if you want to ask questions of him yourself, just go into the TechCrunch Events app and ask a question in the Slido setting, and I'll be getting it up here. But just to start out with, can you just tell me what the companies are that you've
started?
Yeah, just give us sort of the high-level overview so the audience has that context.
Sure, I've been a part of a number of them, but the ones that I've started, the five are Compete, which I started in kind of post-bubble 2000. And then from Compete, we started a company called Lookery, Ghostery, Performable, and now Drift.
Awesome. And just tell me, what have you learned over the course of doing all of these? Can you just, it sounds like there were stages here.
Definitely stages.
What's the sort of stages of enlightenment, if you will?
I'm seeking
about how to build a company?
Yeah. I think I started like most entrepreneurs that I see. I'm a software engineer originally, and so I came from a very focused product and build kind of focus. And that back in late 90s, 2000s, it was all about like just being able to create this thing, right? And so I came from that view, and I thought like product could solve everything. If I created the right product and the right features and the right thing, like then magically it would sell itself, right? And so this story sounds familiar. And then from there, that was the first phase, and I really focused on product. And then through a lot of pain and hard lessons, I learned that in my next phase of businesses, I started to really focus on the process. And what I mean by the process is, how does go-to-market work? What are the right metrics that we should be measuring? How do we measure all the things that we need to in the business and run more like a data-driven business than a product, only focused business? And that was kind of the second phase that I went through. And then left that phase, and when I started Drift, I really started to focus on people. And I thought like, you know what, the product, awesome, process, awesome, but like at the end of the day, the thing that was really the challenge after all was people. And those people are the people inside the building, like people that you work with, your investors, your community, your customer base, like dealing with all of that and then dealing with all the changes as you go through different stages. That was the hard part.
And so how does it all fit together now for Drift? It's people first, but you presumably still have processes.
Yeah,
you still focus on product market fit. So, so I mean, you have priorities, but what is like, can you just sort of like spell out like the operation of how Drift works based on these experiences?
Yeah, so for Drift, I kind of, my mantra has been that it's, the solution like is 99, I used to think it was 99% product and 1% everything else. And then I was kind of in the middle when I was focusing on process, and now I think it's like, it's 99% people, and the 1% is actually the part that we spend all of our time talking about, whether it's the product, the process, the design, the this, the that, and the go-to-market and all of that stuff. All the solutions to everything are people-based solutions. And so what that means for us is that that's the thing that we focus on the most, from the recruiting standpoint, from a culture standpoint, but also from an understanding standpoint. And when we went to market and started working on even our marketing and sales, we went back to the beginning and tried to study and understand copywriting, how do people make human decision making, and all of these things, because these are the things that make all the difference. And so we spend all our time focused on how do we incent people, how do we align different teams, what are different personality types, how do people make decisions, and
what's like a tactical example that someone in the audience could take back to their startup of like how do you analyze like an incentive analysis? Like, okay, you want this team to get something done, how do you set them up for that?
Yeah, the good thing is that it's all incentive based, right? So like the hard thing that you learn after a while is like you want a team to behave a certain way, and so you think that if you just talk about it long enough, if you just find the right models, if you just like hash it out long enough, that they will find their way there. And at the end of the day, it's actually pretty simple. It's like if you align incentives, and those don't have to be financial incentives, but you align incentives, whether that's kudos or or financial, like people will basically play that game and will focus on like wanting to be excellent at what they're doing. So we focus and we make sure that instead of spending all of our time just trying to lecture and teach, that we're also aligning incentives. And most of the time where we see behavior not matching what we expect, it always comes back to we didn't align incentives the right way.
Would you be willing to share an example or two, not necessarily from Drift, of a good and a bad setup for incentives?
Yeah, we have them all the time. We have them at Drift as well, right? So we rolled out a product we launched a product in Q3, big product for us, and now we're analyzing the performance of that product and the performance of the sales team on that product, and it was really good, but not where we thought it should be. And then we went back, and this was actually this morning, and said like, why is that? And it's like, oh, we didn't have any incentives aligned around them focusing on selling that product, so therefore they didn't sell the product. It was that simple. Even though we talked about it forever, everyone was excited, like it was the biggest thing, like there was no incentives aligned around that product.
What's the kind of incentive you gave them? Just like a bonus or just?
In that case, it was that their quota and their quota was aligned around selling that product, right? Because it was a new SKU. It was an additional SKU that they were not used to selling. And so we didn't have any quota relief or incentives around that new product.
Gotcha. And so just going back to this, it's like I think most people, who are building a startup for the first time, they're still product focused today. What's the sort of way that you would explain how to shortcut to where you have what you have learned?
Focus. Yeah, I'd say it's the shortcut.
Is there a shortcut?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a shortcut. I think I talk about like I go back to product-based founders, which are most, and start to talk to them about like how do people make decisions, and we do this teaching thing within Drift, which I use with them as well, which is like, look, have you ever bought a product on Amazon, right? Okay, you know what the product page looks like, right? And why does it look like that? And for most people, if you're a designer or you're a product person, you would look at that page and you'd say, it's pretty ugly and cluttered and it has all these things. Then we talk about it and say like, this actually appeals and have multiple biases in this page and triggers for people with different personality types. And so we use that model to explain to them, here's why you have the social proof. Here's why you have this, there's only 3 of these left, you better buy it now. Because different people make different decisions based on their personality types. And once they see that, it's almost like a matrix moment of like, oh, I never realized that's what it was, right? Like there's a reason it looks like that. There's a reason it wasn't designed like a designer would design it today, which is to remove all the clutter and just have the most beautiful page on
So the clutter is the people.
Yeah.
That was a little unfair.
Yeah.
By the way, you can submit questions to David through the Slido component of your Ask a Question button in the TechCrunch event app, so I'll get it up here. So you've largely focused on SaaS.
Yes.
You've, and as a repeat SaaS founder, you've seen, over the period of how 15, 20 years?
20 years. Yeah.
How do you what has changed?
Massive changes, and it's totally changed the way that we went to market and we started this Drift, started this business. I'd say like in the first generation of SaaS companies, which was like late 90s, early 2000s, like we had a decade of companies that were really in this phase that I call the Edison phase. And what I mean by that, and this is true in any market, right? It was about being able to create the technology. When Salesforce, NetSuite, and others went to market, like their competitors were not other SaaS competitors. Their competitors were on-prem competitors or different technology solutions. In that world, when we were creating companies, the fact that we could even create the technology itself and that we could hide behind patents and we could hide behind like trade secrets and all that stuff, that was the competitive moat that we had in there. And therefore, our companies all had control and can dictate the sales process. Sales process looks a lot different in that world. Then you move to the next.
That was even though you were in the cloud.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
this is all SaaS. This is all cloud-based, right? And so it is more about pure invention in that phase. That's why I call it the Thomas Edison phase. Then we go into the next decade, and that I call the Henry Ford phase.
And this is 2010?
This is, around 2010, late 2007, 2000, around that time. And so it was like 1997 to 2007 on. And so in that decade, and there were companies like, I was part of Performable, Hubspot, Zendesk, et cetera, all the companies that we think about right now that have been around for a while. That phase I call the Henry Ford phase, and it was about factory building. right? The technology was no longer the moat because everyone could copy the technology. We had open source, we had ways to understand. We had Google now, we could search for things on Stack Exchange, we could copy things easily from a code standpoint. The real differentiator in that decade was go-to-market, metrics. How do you measure this stuff? How do you build this stuff? How do you build a factory? Is it horizontal SaaS, vertical SaaS? Is it freemium? We didn't know what freemium was. Was it freemium? Was it touchless? Was it sales rep? Was it inside sales? Was it field sales? Was it a combination of those things? What was LTV? What is LTV to CAC? Nobody knew those things. This is before Lemkin's writing about it. This is before David Scott's writing about it. There was no way to find this information. So that was the moat. And then we run into this next 10 years now.
But people, maybe most people in the audience still think we're in that phase. Though,
no,
right?
We're not in that phase anymore, right? And
so,
in that phase, that was the differentiator. And in that phase, we had competitors. We had 3 to 4 to 5 competitors in any given market. We still had control of the market from a vendor standpoint because there weren't that many alternatives. Now we go and we start drift and we look at the market and we say in any given SaaS category, there's tens, hundreds, thousands of alternatives. And even if they're not SaaS, there's other alternatives for that dollar. So we're in a radically different market. Everybody knows what the metrics look like. Everyone knows how to build the technology. Those moats are gone. So what's the next moat? We believe it's a brand moat, right? It's like who can own the customer, right, and that customer experience across a lifetime of that customer. And in that world, I call that the Procter & Gamble phase, right? We are effectively selling a commodity. The power moves all the way to the customer at that point, because if you have 1,000 alternatives for marketing automation, like you have all the power, right? It's not 20 years ago where there was one vendor or 2 vendors that you had to sit through a sales pitch for, right? You have all the information is free, right? You could go to G2 Crowd, you could go to Trustpilot, you can go anywhere and read about everything that you ever wanted to know about these products. So that information moat is gone. And so that's the phase that I think we're in right now. And we're seeing the number of competitors in every given market accelerate, right? They're not holding steady. Now we're competing truly on a global stage. And so that is, even in marketing itself, we have 7,000 alternatives, right? 7,000 alternatives for that dollar.
And so what do you do if you're, for you as a repeat entrepreneur, you can do things, you can be people first. You have the resources to do everything exactly as you please right now. First, tell me what you are doing because you have the ability to do what you want to do. And then let's say you're out in the crowd looking at building a SaaS startup. How do you differentiate if you don't have that kind of connection? But first, I want to hear how you're doing it the way you want.
Yeah, it's a good long story of how we're doing it the way we want. For us, we focused on building the team first, right? So we built the team first before we built the product. Before we built, go to market. Then we built the product, and then we started to go to market and test different ways to get at this customer base. And even before we had a product in market, we were spending a lot of time marketing and trying to build connection with the type of buyer that we thought was our buyer, which turned out to be true.
This is a pretty different approach from a lot of SaaS.
Very different, right? So we're building community, we're building a relationship, we were doing things, we call it and we still do this.
Break down the tactics, right? So you did surveys, did you start a Facebook group? Did you
we did.
Telegram? I don't know, what do you use?
No, we built relationships, we call it do the things that don't scale. We have a book, it's free, you can go on our website, we'll send you a physical book, it's called This Won't Scale, right? And it's 52 tactical marketing plays that we ran ourselves.
What's the number one?
Yeah, there's no number one, it's not in sorted order, but basically we looked for things that other marketers wouldn't do because they were messy, hard to measure, right, and subscale, right? So everyone wants to, in marketing, wants to look for massive scale, and easy to attribute. But once it's massive scale, easy to attribute, all the arbitrage is gone in that market, right? And that's why you have disproportionate wins for people who move into Google AdWords first, or Facebook advertising first, or Instagram advertising first. There's still, years later, there's still opportunity, but it gets squeezed out, right? And the prices go up. So we looked for all crazy things. We started to say, we're going to just go after and build relationships with Eric one at a time. And everyone was like, what, are you crazy? We need to address tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And no, we're going to build a relationship with Eric. And then we started our own merch, right? Which is, so we have a lot of stuff that we do, which is that we spend a lot of time building, and we do limited run stuff like, by the same manufacturers and same people that do Supreme or do Kith or do whatever, and we do super limited run stuff that have nothing to do with software. I should have worn one today. And we started sending different gifts and different things like that to different people around the world and started to build this community one at a time. We would send books to them. We had a podcast that was really about learning and books called Seeking Wisdom, and anyone was interested in a book that we were reading, we would just mail them a book. And people were like, "What, are you crazy? You can't attribute that."
So you were doing all of this before you launched the product?
Way before.
Like a year, 2 years?
Yeah, a year before doing the product. And so we were just building that up. And so like building up that community, one person at a time. We do the same thing from a recruiting standpoint. We started doing this back at Hubspot, and we do it even more at Drift now, which is like we recruit one person at a time, right? Like, which sounds like insane, right? But like we go after one person at a time. That's what, especially with engineering, that's what helps us stand out. We will go to that person. We'll go to Eric's house and spend time with Eric and recruit this person one at a time.
Well, but so when do you start scaling? When have you started? Are you scaled?
We are still doing this.
Are you
still doing it?
What sort of scale are you at now?
We are 300 and some odd people right now in 3 offices, Boston, San Francisco, and Seattle. We're about to open another office in Tampa and an office in London. We'll go to somewhere around 600 people in 2020. So we will continue to do things this way. And every time we regress, and which we do, and try to go to the easy to scale, easy to measure kind of things, the performance goes away, right? Because everyone else is doing the same thing. So you basically have to look for things that other people won't do because they're too hard or too messy or are hard to attribute.
Gotcha. One of the other secret sauces of a lot of Silicon Valley is the alumni networks, the mafias as they're called. Tell me how that's worked for you. I mean, you're based in Boston.
Yes.
You've worked with some of the same people in more than one company.
Many.
How have you, just tell me what you've done there.
Yeah, so overall from a recruiting standpoint, I've always taken the long view and thought like, hey, we're building relationships. I always thought myself like a people collector and like, oh, I meet Eric. Eric's amazing. There's nothing that we can do today, but like maybe some company down the road or 5 years down the road, I will think, oh, we have the perfect thing for Eric. I'm going to reach out to him. So we start to build up those relationships and collect all of these interesting people, and don't try to sell them into something that is probably not the right fit. And so we take this very long view of doing this kind of recruiting phase.
Gotcha. And so, I mean, do you have anyone you've worked with at every company?
Yeah, definitely. So I have people, and this is something that we try to talk about a lot in the team, which is like, hey, this like world that we're in, whether it's software or something else that you work in, is like super tiny. All the time I'll run into people that I worked with in 1998, and I haven't seen them since 1999, and they moved to London, and they moved here, and this, that, and all of a sudden they're working at one of our customers, or maybe they're the decision-making maker at our customer. It's a very small world, so you have to be, you have to treat people the right way, and so that goes the same for people that we bring in the team. So I have people that worked at my first company in like 2001 who work now at Drift. I have people who worked at HubSpot who now work at Drift. I have vice versa, and so we're always trying to find the right place for someone. And I've gone as far as like, I want people to be on the team who want to be on the team. And so like people will ask me like, oh, do you know a really great person, engineer that does X, Y, Z? I said, Eric does, and Eric's on my team. And I'm like, you should talk to him. And if Eric wants to go, he should go, right? Because like, we only want people to actually be there. And then that person knows that I am looking out for the best interests of them, and even if they go, we may end up working again together later.
Well, and so you were telling me backstage that you have a standing offer to invest in the people you work with. And so that's what happens if somebody wants to leave, you give them a check?
Yeah, so
start a company?
I started this probably a decade ago, which is, so I've been angel investing for a while, and I've always said to people on the team, because we would attract in the early days people who wanted to learn how to start their own company. And one of the things I would say, and I still say to everyone, is like, look, if you come on board, work with us for some phase, like, if you want to leave at any point, like, and start a company, like myself and my co-founder Elias, we will be the first checks in whatever you want to start, like no questions asked. And so we have done that for companies in Boston, companies in San Francisco, companies all over the place, and we continue to do that.
Well, and so I had a question earlier. What is your advice for somebody starting a company today to be people first and to do this? Like, if you don't have the resources, it's generally to do things that don't scale and are surprising, but you do have some ability to scale because you have the resources.
A lot of resources, yeah.
But for someone who doesn't have a lot of resources out here, what do you say?
Yeah, I think it's the easiest. It continues to get easier and easier to do these things, right? Because everyone is accessible at this point, and so like everyone's accessible, and the entire network of people is addressable. Like we built up a lot of marketing within LinkedIn, which I think is a place that I would advise people to go spend time now. You can find your buyer, you can find the people that you want to recruit.
LinkedIn is better than ever? It's the place
Yes.
to be? Why?
But
I mean,
by far. By far.
You see people knock it in the blogosphere,
the
Twitter sphere, whatever.
It's amazing the performance that we have on LinkedIn.
Really?
Even today is insane. So some of the stuff once they added video, once they added some of the other stuff, they added live recently and all that stuff, you have the audience that you want to address. And you have the ability to build a network of people who can be the network of people who are your future buyers or future people that you want to join the company. That's a very different model and they're opting in by connecting with you to your content.
This is specifically for SaaS, would you say?
I would say for any kind of company I would do this. But for SaaS specific, it's fantastic. And so we connect with people, we build up community on LinkedIn, we publish a lot of content on there. A lot of times when people meet us, they're like, yeah, I've seen like 500 videos from you guys. Like it's like nonstop, drift videos. And it's because we produce a lot of content, put it on there. It's way more effective than Facebook, Instagram, or any of that stuff largely for a B2B audience.
Gotcha. All right, we got some questions in here. What's one thing you learned from your first business that you carried into your second? Actually, I think we covered that, sorry. Your companies were sold quite early and were not VC funded. I'm not sure if this is actually true.
Yeah, they were all, not all, but most of them were VC funded. But I did sell, the Compete was the first one that was 7 years at that company, and we sold it in 2007. We started in 2000, and that was the longest. Everything else has been way shorter. Like Drift, Performable, which was before Drift, I sold to Hubspot when we were a year and a half old.
But you were at Hubspot for a while.
And then I was at Hubspot for 4 years after that. And then all Ghostery I sold as well, and all the other companies we sold pretty quickly. And I don't think it has anything to do with, I think, for me, it had more to do with how big did I think those businesses would get over time. And remember, like back then, like we hadn't hit scale, right? Compounding works after time. Like if you would look at like some of these business ideas back in the early 2000s, like they didn't make any sense because the audience was so small and the audience continued to compound it. And that's why something like MailChimp, which is amazing business, like you would have looked at that in early 2000s, or at least I did, and would say like, that's like a feature of a platform. Like you just send like, it only sends email. Like that's weird, right? But now obviously, it's a massive business because the addressable market has grown so big.
Gotcha. Fundamental question, how do you go about getting your first 10 customers outside of your friends and family?
Yeah, yeah. I will tell you that starting Drift, although we had a lot of resources in starting Drift and a lot of, people in the network, like it was beyond humbling, right? Like to go back to the beginning and like be knocking on doors to get your first 10 customers. My advice that I give everyone is like, well, one, if you're creating a paid-for product, like you have to start charging from day one. Like you can't go into this like, hey, try this free product, and then if you like it, will you pay for it someday?
Not even saying we're going to charge you next month. You just have to charge right off the bat.
So what we did at multiple companies, including Drift, was just to go. We call it like the dollar test. We just go talk to someone. Hey, Eric, we're building this product. It doesn't exist yet, like that. And most people are nice, and they will tell you, oh, this is great. I'd love to use it. And I'd be like, okay, how much money do you have on you? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, how much money is in your pocket right now? And they pull out like $5, $1, $20 or whatever. And I'm like, just give me $20, $5, whatever, and you will have lifetime access to this product, right?
So that's how you do it.
That's how we do it. And most people, and we still have all these dollars framed all over the place, 20s and 5s and this.
And so you have like 50 people who are like, this is the best deal I've ever made in my life.
Exactly.
They're now charging like, $1,000 a seat or something. I don't know.
Totally. And what it teaches the entrepreneur though is that most of the people that will tell you that they love this thing will not give you $1, will not give you $5, even though they'll tell you. And what it does is it shortcuts things because most people would end up spending so much time coming back to you because you keep telling me you love it because you're a nice person, you don't want to hurt my feelings, when if you would have asked them for $5, they would say there's no way they're going to give you $5. Yeah, so we do this all the time.
Do you have any skeletons in the closet to bring out, things you tried along these lines where you didn't get any enough dollars?
We just kept going until we got dollars. We went to...
For everything?
Yeah, we went to...
So just keep going until people pay you, I guess?
Yes, we learned this. We learned this at Performable. We started doing this like dollar tests because we had existing customers that were already paying us, and we would end up talking to them. They'd say, "I love your product, but it doesn't do X, Y, Z. My company's special. We need X, Y, Z feature. When is it going to be ready? This is like deal breaker."
Right, that's classic SaaS.
Classic thing.
Like you become a consulting shop.
Yeah. And so immediately, what I started to do was like to say, "No problem, Eric. You know what? We're going to build that. We don't have it yet. It's only going to be," and I would do something that was ridiculous. Let's say they were paying us $5,000 a month. I would say it's only going to be $20 more a month. And then we're going to build it for you. You're going to be the first one to have it. And what would happen? Yes, what would happen almost every single time is that they would say, there would be a pause, awkward pause, and they'd be like, "I need to go talk to my manager. I need to go talk to someone. I'll get right back to you. That's important. I'll get back to you. We'll talk later." And almost every single time, that person continued to be a customer and never asked for that feature again. And what it taught us was like to stop chasing these things, and that it wasn't as important as they were saying. When it's free to ask for anything, like people just keep asking, and it's a deal breaker, no problem, give me $20 a month, you pay us $5,000, like what does it matter? And I just started making up really ridiculous amounts of money. Obviously, we weren't going to do this kind of technique forever, but that was what we were doing in the early days.
So now I'm getting to the elephant in the room. Everyone keeps asking me about it.
What's that?
Is there ever hesitation in doing it all over again, of rolling the dice another time? Just the general idea of like, why keep starting companies, right? Like you don't need to.
Mental problem. Yeah, I would say for sure.
It's the solution.
I always said that like if you start one company, it's excusable because like you were naive or you didn't know. You start two, it's questionable. You start three or more, you're like certifiable. Like there's something wrong. There is some deep psychological need that you're trying to fill, and so you probably should analyze that. And
so have you had to analyze?
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, like it's always the same. It's like, you know, someone told me I couldn't do something, or like I have something to prove. It's always like this thing of like this chip on your shoulder of trying to prove something because like you did not think you were good enough, or you were not allowed to do certain things, or someone put you down, or like usually like a parent or
why do you think you feel that way? Can you open up about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I grew up like single mom, and my dad was not around, and like and then he was around, and once in a while, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know about entrepreneur was not a word that existed, like at least when I grew up, and then, but I knew I wanted to start some businesses, or I didn't know what that meant. And at some point, like when I was in college, my dad was there, and he showed up, and he gave me an application. I lived in New York, and the application was to apply for the New York City Department of Sanitation. And it was the first time that I saw my mom then cry, right? And so there's no way I'm going to do that. And so so that I'm sure has and many things that among my childhood that has impact on that, right? And I was always, even in New York, the outsider, the person. I lived in neighborhoods where I was the only person that looked like me, and I'm sure all of that has some psychological load.
So how do you feel now?
I feel like still have something to prove. I will never start another company again. This is like the last one, so I'll just make it last as long as possible.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I mean,
because you want to do this one forever, or because you're tired of starting companies?
Because I want to stay with this one forever, and I'm also tired of starting companies in that order.
So 5, who's going over 5 here?
Yeah, Elias and I, when we started this company, like in the early, we left Hubspot when we went public, and we started this company. In the first year and a half, I kind of describe as like we're searching for product market fit. I kind of describe it as like walking through the desert. What I mean by that is that there is no landmark, right? Like you're just walking, and every day that would go by, we'd be like, we did a lot of stuff, but I don't know if it mattered. Like, are we like deeper in the desert, or are we almost out of the desert? And we finally like hit product market fit, and we finally had something. Like at least we were looking at a very steep mountain, but at least there was a mountain with a path, right? And so, but that first year and a half, every single day, the two of us would look at each other and be like, what did we do? Why did we do this again? Like you forget like how painful that phase is, right? Because you're questioning everything, all your friends and all your network and all these things, all these people that were you were close with, like they all start to disappear. Like when you go back to the bottom, right? And so it's a humbling phase.
Awesome. Last piece of advice.
Sure.
Got 30 seconds left. Last piece of advice for the founders in the crowd.
Yeah, it took me forever to learn it, which is like, you don't have to learn everything by brute force. I learned most things by brute force and pain, by just like trying to learn on my own. And like these lessons are out here, including at events like this. Like, actually listen to a lot of these things and like save yourself the heartache. Like now I read a lot, and I have mentors and role models and a lot of people that I talk to, because I don't want to keep learning everything through brute force and pain.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.